Başlayabilirsiniz hocam.
Okay, hello. What I would like to present today is a work from my PhD study, and I titled my presentation today, Women's Work, Households and Global Industrial Production in Istanbul. And I would like to present this interaction between women's work, households and global industrial production in the case of garment industry in Turkey. So what I would like to demonstrate in this presentation is to give you a view of how we can bring women and households into global commodity chain analysis, and also examine the ways in which women are integrated to global industrial production in a society where the employment rates the lowest among OECD countries. And in the final part of my presentation, I will present how women's work in the garment industry in Istanbul affect traditional gender relations and roles. Let me begin with a small, short view of Turkey's garment industry situation in the world. With the neoliberal turn in economic policies in the early 1980s, the garment industry became Turkey's most important export industries. During the period of 1980s and 2000s, Turkey's share of world garment exports increased greatly, making it the fourth largest exporter of garments after China, European Union and Hong Kong. Therefore, in my study, what I examined the relationship between the rising export success of the garment industry and women's work. As elsewhere, the industry in Turkey heavily draws on women's labor, although women's contribution to export success is largely remain invisible in official statistics. It's not recognized. Women are the main suppliers of informal labor for the industry. Through the subcontracted and home-based piecework. So the task for me was to understand the structure of the industry which enabled women's integration into production, albeit this integration was in a very invisible form. For this, I used the analysis of global commodity chain in shaping the structure of the industry, and also in what forms this structure of the industry shaped labor needs of the garment production in Istanbul. So departing from the definition or global commodity chain analysis, which sees the global commodity chain as a set of inter-organizational networks clustered around one commodity or product, linking households, enterprises, and states to one another within the world economy. Therefore, these networks are situationally specific, socially constructed, and locally integrated, underscoring the social embeddedness of economic organizations. So therefore, there is no doubt the utilization of global commodity chains give further flexibility and competitiveness to global industries. So I analyzed the Turkish garment industry as a buyer-driven industry and identified three different markets where the products of Istanbul's garment industry were destined. These are the European markets or Western markets, domestic markets, and the markets of the former Soviet Union, which is mostly based on informal networks. And these markets have their own characteristics of production and subcontracting. As you can see from the table here, I identified production nodes of for three different markets. The first one is domestic production, which usually relies on upmarket domestic consumption, use very large textile corporations, and mostly owned by national capital. And the other two columns are production in mass export-oriented production, and national representatives of international brand names are usually destined for Western markets, and they are organized in different subcontracting relationships. And the last column represents this extra global commodity circuits that I identify, or it's destined for the former Soviet Union, which has created a vibrant market in Istanbul for tourists coming to shop, which is basically a shuttle trade. In Laleli, which is a neighborhood in Istanbul, and it is an important node in the shuttle trade, specializing in manufacturing and wholesale of garments. And what we see is the garment ateliers are the center of all these production system. And it is the garment ateliers underlies Turkey's garment export success, and which creates a network of subcontractings who help to produce fixed cost and provide lower labor for the industry. Therefore, the large-scale factories, in an overall view, the large-scale factories, garment ateliers, and home-based pieceworkers are all part of this subcontracting network, helping the Turkish garment industry to become an export success in the world. So, in my study, what I've seen is the garment ateliers stand at the heart of this subcontracting chain, providing backward and forward linkages to factory production and home-based pieceworkers. So I identified 3 different ateliers in my study, producing for different markets and having different production qualities. For example, ateliers working for brand name exports, they usually are very specialized and quality-oriented. They produce quality-oriented products. Therefore, they utilize skilled labor. And in the second column, what we have is ateliers producing for standard export garments such as t-shirts and sweatshirts. And the last one is the Laleli market, or what we call Laleli market or shuttle trade. They have lower quality of products, and they also utilize very large number of manual labor. So actually, through the integration of all these ateliers as the main side of the production, the industry can reach untapped source of low-wage women and children. And ability of reaching this segment of workforce is made possible by the family-based nature of the ateliers, because most of these small-scale ateliers are owned and run by large families. And because this was the most suitable way to integrate women into production without disturbing traditional gender ideologies. So let me have a look at the pattern of women's work in these ateliers. And in the garment workshop, what we see, there are 2 different groups of workers. The first group is composed of close family members and relatives who are the core workers of garment ateliers. This core group is available for work as long as their fathers, husbands, and uncles run the workshop. For example, mothers or wives of workshop owners are the invisible heart of this core labor force working for the ateliers. Their role in the family business are quite diverse and range from direct contribution to production or to cooking for workers or cleaning the workshop. And these women not only burden with the trimming or cleaning the garments at home, sometimes they may act as a home-based piece workers, but they also organize their neighbors and relatives when extra labor is needed for the production. Although these women mostly remain as housewives, they extend their domestic tasks beyond meeting the physical needs of their household members to providing and maintaining particular tie with relatives, neighbors, and friends who are in turn may act as a source of aid and reserve labor for the export production. So in another sense, their involvement in the production creates an environment in which workshop is viewed as a family setting for women's work that further attracts more women into the production. But these women, wives and husbands, wives or housewives or mothers, they don't usually get paid for what they do. They are clearly contributing the export production in many diverse ways. So they don't only support the production with their labor in the workshop, but they also manage relationships in the neighborhood. And both of these activities are key to the survival of their business. So, garment ateliers in this sense offer women employment opportunities in their family circle. The industry taps into an abundant, if hidden, reserve of home-based piece workers and unpaid women who consider helping their enterprises, family enterprises, and their work is seen to be natural extended of their domestic and marital obligation. And the second group of women that I would like to focus on today is home-based piece workers. Actually, these women who are working as piece workers for the garment production are considered to be the neediest women in their community, and they comprise the most casual form of labor. The women involved in the home-based piece work are usually pitied in their community because they are divorcees or widow, or those women whose husbands are not providing. And workshop owners present piecework as a kind of social charity to those women in need, even though this is entirely a business matter for them. And moreover, what we see, home-based garment work is usually done in a network of reciprocity among women. When there is a need to finish the work quickly, other women help them out with their piecework by getting together for tea gatherings. And when we look at what these women, how these women paid, their piece rates are quite low, and their total monthly income is usually much more lower than the minimum wage in Turkey. And women themselves consider this money as to be kind of bazaar money, where they go to do their weekly shopping for fresh vegetables and basic needs of their income. If I may to summarize the labor, women's labor in the garment ateliers, having family members, relatives and friends is the key factor in keeping the kin relations at the center of garment production. On the one hand, this has helped women's access to labor market by creating a family atmosphere, while on the other hand, this has generated paternalistic relationships in which gender and kin relations are imported into the workplace. If I may move to my last topic of today's presentation, is to analyze the implications of women's work on gender relations in Turkey and how this affects traditional gender roles and relations. And for this, I utilized the framework of Elson and Pearson, who conceptualized the impact of employment on gender subordination in three forms. First one is to tendencies decompose. The second one is the intensifying existing forms of gender subordination. And the third one is to recompose new forms of subordination. For the first one, tendencies to compose, what I have found in my work is a certain degree of independence and increased bargaining power for women at home. Young girls move up to new jobs and become skilled garment workers, while a prospect of earning a little higher wages. And they have certain degree, or they gain certain degree of freedom in choosing their spouses. And in the second form, intensifying existing forms of gender subordination, what we see is consolidation of women's role as mothers, housewives, and mothers. Women's dedication and work is socially recognized and rewarded in Turkey by approving them as good women and good mothers, not as paid workers. As women's traditional roles prove to be vital for the success of the business, by holding on those traditional roles and identities, women gain status and decision-making power. So it creates a kind of vicious circle that it feeds into strengthening the traditional gender roles for women. And recompose new forms of subordination is the most visible in the public policing of women's behavior. The promise of